Australian voters will have their say on the Voice referendum after legislation passed its final hurdle in the Senate yesterday. This was some of the reaction from Canberra.
The Voice is four things. It's risky, it's unknown, it's divisive and it's permanent.
And if the yes vote is successful, we will be divided forever.
Just because you can say that you've got a connection with this land for 65,000 years, I don't care.
You're following the king. The king. We're all bound by the king. And now the poor little blackfellas are begging for a seat at the table and all we get is to become advisors.
Some people saying this goes too far, some saying it doesn't go far enough. I say we've got the balance right.
All right, well, joining us live now is the Assistant Minister for Indigenous Health, Malarndirri McCarthy. Malarndirri, good to see you. Thanks for your time this morning. So if that's the division that we get on day one, how are we going to be by October?
Well, isn't democracy a wonderful thing, Peter? And so is the Senate. Clearly, we obviously had some interesting debate on the floor of the Senate, but I must say to the senators that I am deeply grateful that we were able to pass the bill quite strongly yesterday. And obviously this is now out to the Australian people, Pete, and that's what referendums are all about. OK, if the Prime Minister announced at Gama, then the referendum is 2 months later, so around October after the footy finals. Is that really enough time? Pete. Well, I mean, yeah, that's you know, I like the guessing game and that's where a lot of people are landing. But is that really enough time for the public to consider? Well, we will find out, won't we? I mean, we made it very clear, Pete, on the night of the election when the Prime Minister came out in his speech. We took it to the Australian people in the election and we've upheld that. And certainly by following through with the timelines in the Parliament, this now will be the challenge, won't it, over the next couple of months to see what the Australian people think. And we'll know on the day of the referendum. OK, but if I mean, just back to that question then, if the Prime Minister announces at Gama when it's going to be, and just for argument's sake it is October, I mean, you've only got 2 months there. Is that enough time for people to properly consider their vote? Well, I think, look, I think we've certainly got from now, Pete, like even though the Prime Minister can only announce it 33 days out from the actual date, it's quite clear to the Australian public now that it's passed in the Parliament that it will be out in the public domain. And we have until now, up till December really, because he said between October and December, to be able to inform Australians to the best of our ability. Will more design principles be released? The design principles are there. It will be up to the Yes campaigners now out there, and those groups are very much ready. Excuse me, Pete. That's OK. I haven't got a drink of water here, but anyway, so it'll be up to the Yes campaigners out there to be able to talk to people, talk to Australians, answer any questions, and clearly anything that I'm asked wherever I travel, I'll try to do that to the best of my ability. But we do have to remember that if we are successful, and that is an if we are successful, it will be left to the Parliament to legislate what that future model will look like in consultation with First Nations people. Is it on the Prime Minister if it's not successful? Well, isn't it on all of us, Pete? I mean, we've got to do the best that we can, and referendums are tough in our country, as you know. Only 8 have been won, and we're facing a really tough battle. But we believe in this. I believe in it, and we've got to give it our best shot. Noel Pearson's belief seems to have taken a bit of a hit, though. He claimed the campaign does not have a clear message. When you've got so many details that won't be released until after the referendum, how is that fair for voters in that they won't be able to get a full picture of what they're voting for? Well, it's about keeping it really quite simple. I mean, this is an advisory body that we're talking about in terms of First Nations people having a say around legislation and policies that impact them. And to be recognised in the Constitution. Parliaments always determine the details in most circumstances, Pete, and that's not unusual. We've seen that with previous referendums. We've certainly seen that with legislation, and you know that is up to politicians then to determine. Might you have a better chance, though, as Noel Pearson said, of just recognising Indigenous Australians in the Constitution rather than have that advisory body as well? Well, Noel Pearson's still very supportive of the Voice, Pete. I mean, he's very much on the referendum working group. And I understand for people like Noel, for those stalwarts of the Indigenous elders who've been around for decades pursuing reconciliation, that maybe they feel a bit of a despair at times. But I certainly encourage them to say, look, you know, you've got younger voters here, you've got younger First Nations people, younger Australians who think this is a no-brainer and that Australians should say yes.
Polls, and a number of them have the Yes campaign in trouble, though. It's not a good sign for it. Why do you think that is? What do you put that down to?
Well, it depends on who you talk to, Peter. I mean, I came from Barunga Festival, where we had the 4 land councils of the Northern Territory. We had the Kimberley Land Council and the Cape York Land Council, and they represent over thousands and thousands of traditional owners right across Northern Australia, and all of them were supportive.
Okay.
So in terms of, you know, that kind of view, there is a great deal of support, certainly from First Nations people across Australia. But I think, like elections, you know, the most important poll will be the one on the day.
And just finally here, I mean, do you fear it will make the country, or perhaps a good portion of it, more divided?
I will always urge my fellow colleagues in the Parliament and Australians generally that we are bigger than that. I do believe in our country, Pete. I think we can do this in a dignified and respectful way, and I will always continue to ask that.
Okay. Malarndirri McCarthy, always good to have you with us. We'll chat to you soon.